Audio number 3. So now we're on slide 13. We'll talk about how the party has retreated yet strengthened its position. There's a number of pages about this in the McGregor book that you're reading this week, how the party has retreated from its societal control, sticking its nose into virtually every aspect of a person's life, from controlling housing to controlling marriages, and there's a little bit less nowadays of controlling the number of children that one can have, and controlling movement, banning religion during Mao's time, virtually banning it, into a different sort of era where the party isn't bothering with stuff like that anymore. And the basic reason for this is that the party no longer has an ideological set of goals to change society into a socialist society from being a feudal or capitalist, semi-capitalist society. Now the party is interested in letting people make money and becoming rich. As Deng Xiaoping said, to get rich is glorious. So this means that there really is no more ideological set of goals, and if you don't have these ideological goals anymore, then it's not necessary to reach down into society and control so many aspects of personal life. But this does not mean that the party does not want to control the real levers of power. The government, the most prosperous aspects of the economy, the military, the media, the courts, the educational institutions. These things remain under very strict control, and as we go through the rest of this lecture, I'll try to make that more clear. Let's go on to slide 14. One of Jiang Zemin's, he was, of course, the two general secretaries ago. He was the predecessor of Hu Jintao, who just retired. Jiang Zemin was in power in the 1990s. And one of his famous sayings was, Jian Shao, that's a third tone there, Jian Shao Ma Fan. Let's reduce trouble. And although people made fun of this in the West, and some Chinese people made fun of it, there are deep roots behind this sort of wish by Chinese leaders. In Imperial China, it was normal to allow local government leaders who were appointed after passing Confucian examinations and were dispatched to the county level to be in charge of a county. It was normal to let them collect taxes as they wished in order to fulfill set requirements for passing tax revenues up to Beijing, but they could do what they wanted, and their word was law in the county. So that as long as they ran things in a manner that kept everything stable, as long as there were no revolts, as long as there was no subversive activity against the empire within their county or when they rose within their province, as long as there's no embarrassment to the dynasty, then everything was fine. There were some local leaders who were more honest than others. There were some who were terribly corrupt, but as long as they didn't mess everything up and cause problems for the central government, they were allowed to do virtually whatever they wanted. The rule of law did not really exist. It was the rule of the representative of the emperor at the local level. The modern Chinese Communist Party has some parallels to that system. Particularly, the Chinese Communist Party now in its post-ideological stage, where changing society from neo-capitalist, or not neo-capitalist, proto-capitalist or feudal into a socialist society, all that is gone. Now the modern CCP is interested in expanding, consolidating state power and making China great again. And local CCP secretaries under Mao, who had near dictatorial powers, still have that dictatorial power. They are in charge of everything in their area, the police, even to some extent, like with the provincial CCP secretary, has great influence over the military in their area, even though that's changing. Under Mao, that was very true. At the county level, they didn't. But at the province level, they had a lot of influence over the local military because the local military officers, the senior officers, did not rotate from place to place very much. Mostly they stayed put for decades under Mao. Now that's changing because the central government does not want the military to become too comfortable in one place. Now they're starting to transfer them around, like happens with the U.S. military and with other military bodies in other countries, in order to stop them from being too localized, from becoming loyal to a local leader. But now, with the party at the local level, they still have nearly dictatorial powers. They also are transferred around more than they used to be, so that they don't get too entrenched in one place. However, there's still this problem that we'll talk about more next week when we get into the problems of modern communism in China. There's still this problem of corruption. And the reason the problem of corruption exists is rooted in the structure of the Communist Party as it exists today. And that structure is that there is no rule by law, that's by law, as you have in certain countries of the West, particularly the United States and Britain and Australia. Instead, there's rule of the law, and the law is written by the party. There is no contesting it, and when the party wishes to ignore the law, it does so. And when these local leaders who are in charge of municipal CCP committees or county CCP committees, when they want to do whatever they want to do, whether it's seize land from the peasantry in order to sell it for land development by a big farm conglomerate or by a housing developer, they can do it. And they give virtually nothing to the people that they're kicking off of the land. The same thing is true in cities. So this structure that allows this kind of thing to happen, where Beijing basically doesn't care as long as there's no revolt, as long as there's no embarrassment, there's some echoes to the past of the way things were run in Imperial China. And at the same time, unlike Imperial China, there is this Darwinian internal competition between localities to attract outside business to come in and invest, so that they're trying to outdo each other, basically to screw their own people, to allow outside interests to take advantage of land or resources, giving them the best possible deal, and disadvantaging their own people in the process. It's very tragic, but it is what it is, and it comes from the structure of the government as it stands. Let's go on to slide 15. So this has been nicknamed by the scholar Min-Shin Pei, family name Pei, P-E-I, given name Min-Shin, M-I-N-X-I-N. Min-Shin Pei is a scholar. I've forgotten where he teaches. He teaches here in the United States, but he's a professor of political science at a major university in the United States somewhere. He's written a book called China's Trapped Transition, which I've been going through in order to try to make this a more meaningful lecture. He refers to the system as one of developmental autocracy. It's also called authoritarian capitalism by many commentators. There's been, of course, this generation of capital because of the economic boom of the 1980s and 1990s that led to this privatization of many state assets, especially in the 1990s, that ended up benefiting CCP insiders. And this is because these things are not done according to law. They're done according to party policy, and much leeway is given when it came to disposing of state assets. And indeed, this continues to go on now, the disposing of land, which is all a state asset. The state owns all the land. When it comes to giving out 99-year leases for development, then at the local level, the municipal party committee or the county party committee, its decisions are law. There's no governing law that says that it will be done this way, it will be done that way. Peasants will be given X percentage of the price of the land that's sold to a developer if it's taken away from them, and so on. None of that applies. It's all up to the local CCP committee how to do these things, and as long as they don't cause a problem, as long as they don't cause a revolt because they're stupid or because they're insensitive to obvious realities, as long as they don't overdo it, in other words, in exploiting the masses, then the party lets them get away with it. And this is true all the way to the top. Now, this is not necessarily a Chinese thing. I want to stop and note that everybody here in this country knows that if you have millions of dollars at your disposal, you have a lot more free speech than the average person. You can hire lobbyists who can go to Washington, D.C. and pay money into the campaign coffers of members of Congress, and you can get your way in a lot of different things. Lobbying organizations that are rich get their way in Washington. And because elections cost so much to run in this country, and because the level of public discourse has dropped to such a low level, it is the 15-second TV spot that seems to rule elections nowadays. Maybe that's not an absolute, but it certainly is becoming more and more of a reality every 4 years. So our system is not immune to what has to be called corruption. Corruption at very high levels. In China, that corruption is of a different nature. It's much more blatant, and it's much less in check than it is in this country. At least in this country, I have to say. If the press gets a hold of a story exposing the malfeasance or wrongdoing of some official, then that official's career can end very quickly. And this has nothing to do, or less to do anyway, with political infighting between parties or inside of parties. But in China, the only people who are pilloried like that for wrongdoing are people who have offended the wrong supreme power holder. For example, during the time of Jiang Zemin in the 1990s, the mayor of Beijing, who was also the party secretary, Chen Shitong, became an enemy of Jiang Zemin, and so Jiang Zemin used the levers of power, the Central Discipline Inspection Commission, to investigate Chen Shitong and managed to have him removed from office for very real wrongdoing, but it was only because Chen Shitong pissed off Jiang Zemin in the end. That was the only reason why he was deposed. So let's take a look at Premier Wen Jiabao. Just retired last year. His nickname is Grandpa Wen, Wen being his family name, because he was inclined to visit areas that had been hit by earthquakes or other natural disasters. He was inclined to work as hard as he could for the interests of the poor, and indeed, there's no reason to suspect that these activities on his part were faked. He did seem to have a genuine desire to assist the poor of society, if for no other reason than to promote stability in society. However, while he held the reins of government, his family was very busy. His family was involved in all sorts of business activities where they received favorable treatment or other advantages because they were related to the premier of the state council, Wen Jiabao. His wife, for example, was in the diamond business and received licenses and advantages in purchases that she never would have received had she not been in that position. And a fortune worth over $2 billion spread amongst about 12 or 13 people is the result of all that. This came out in New York Times. You can find these easily on the web. These came out in New York Times articles on the, I think it was the 15th or the 12th of November, and exactly a month later in December of 2012. And indeed, before this time, the factories that were producing fake DVDs and pirated CDs and stuff like that in South China, a lot of them were rumored to be connected to former Premier Li Peng, the predecessor of Wen Jiabao. That's the way it is. Moving right along. Another party method of control to make sure that the heights of society are firmly under the control of the party is to maintain control over who runs the largest of the enterprises. The 50 or 52 largest state-owned enterprises in China are run by people who are appointed by the Central Committee's organization department. This is the HR of the Chinese Communist Party. These two logos you see here for China Unicom and China Telecom, these were the two principal mobile phone suppliers, cell phone suppliers. In China, there are a number of others, but these are the ones that have the big share of the market. China Unicom is owned by the Chinese military. China Telecom is owned by the former Ministry of, it's still around, the Ministry of Information Industries. And our reading in McGregor this week tells about when the party organization department basically swapped the leadership of these two competitors, switched the CEOs between one and the other to keep competition from getting too vociferous, because too much competition between these state-owned entities that make money for for the ministries and for the states, for the state itself, would not be good. It's good to have a reasonable amount of competition, but not cutthroat competition, because if you have cutthroat competition, that means lower prices. That means less money for the state. So there you go. When they expand abroad, as also is outlined in our reading this week, Stuff like this will be on the exam, by the way, so don't think that all you need to do is listen to these lectures. Make sure you do as much of the reading as you can. When they have expanded abroad, as the readings make clear, their level of party control and the specifics about how they're controlled and who makes the real decisions are kept away from the public eye. They're not hidden so much inside China. There's always been this idea that inside of China you don't have to worry so much about what is exposed because there is a saying in Chinese, don't worry, we're all Chinese. 放心，咱们都是中国人. That's still quite true today. And indeed, the thin veil of the Chinese language is often used to hide a great deal, which is one reason why I like trolling around Chinese websites. Going on to slide 17. Here's another couple examples of large state-owned enterprises. And indeed, this photograph on the right, the China National Railway Corporation, it's a brand new thing that was formed out of the Ministry of Railways. Who do they have guarding their front gate of their headquarters? They have a People's Armed Police soldier, the same sort of soldier who guards the entrances to the ministries and to the foreign diplomatic missions. Going on to slide 18. We've been through the special economic zones already, but I wanted to use the next couple of slides to remind you about what they've become. You can see how there first were 4 and then there were more through the 1980s, and these became more and more important as the economy expanded. And the reason they were important is because these were the first places where infrastructure, that is electricity, water, garbage collection, and so forth, were built up to levels that would support foreign enterprises and intense manufacturing, high volume manufacturing. Going on to slide 19, they're still very important because they have all of this infrastructure in place, and the local CCP committees are accustomed to dealing with foreign businesses and the problems associated with having a lot of foreigners around. And indeed, they're also positioned along the coast, and one of them is right next to Hong Kong. So this has retained their importance, even though the special advantages they started out with, taxation benefits and the ability to have foreign investment, have been expanded throughout the country. So now some people like to say that all of China is a special economic zone, but in reality, they have all the advantages they used to have on paper in the special economic zones alone. These have been expanded nationwide, but the practical advantages still remain within the special economic zones themselves. We'll stop this audio 3 here and go on to slide 20.